Hello, my fellow citizens, fellow Liberians. My name is L.Varnie B. Mamey, and I'm a former human rights investigator of the Independent National Commission on Human Rights of the Republic of Liberia. I'm a human rights consultant, and I'm a former student leader of the University of Liberia. And so I come with a wealth of knowledge of what it means to advocate for human rights and for justice in a country like Liberia that came out of a brutal civil war. My attention today is drawn to the nomination of Louis Brown by President Joseph Boakai to represent Liberia at the United Nations General Assembly as Liberia's ambassador to that august body. For me, as a person with human rights background, with a history of advocacy against injustice, with a history of advocacy against impunity, with a history of advocacy for the rule of law, it is an affront to see a man like Louis Brown with tainted character, a man who is an associate of the former warlord Charles Taylor of the former NPFL, to see Joseph Boakai nominating a man like Louis Brown to go and represent the Liberian people at the United Nations General Assembly is not only disheartening, but it is an affront in the face of those who are fighting for justice and to end impunity in a country like Liberia that went through a brutal civil war. So for that reason, we are calling on the President Honorable Joseph Boakai, to withdraw with immediate effect the nomination of Louis Brown as Liberia's representative to the United Nations. President Boakai, we ask you to do the right thing. And you know what is right. You've been in government over 40 years. You know all of the characters in government. You know the character of Honorable Louis Brown. And for you, as an experienced leader of the Republic of Liberia, to nominate Louis Brown, who you know is indicted by the TRC, to send him to the United Nations of all persons and of all places, should not have even happened. However, the fact that the nomination has already been made, we are calling on the Liberian Senate to deny or reject the confirmation of Louis Brown, on grounds that this very Senate, including the House, passed resolution for the establishment of war and economic crime courts in Liberia to bring the perpetrators and the alleged perpetrators of war crimes and economic crimes against the Liberian people to justice. And so for that reason, we are calling on the Liberian Senate to reject or deny the confirmation of Louis Brown, for the sake of the victims of war and economic crime courts in Liberia, for the sake of fighting for justice, and for the sake of fighting against impunity in a country that went through a disastrous and brutal civil war. Why do we call for the rejection of Louis Brown? Why are we calling for the revocation of his nomination by the president? The reason is simple. Louis Brown is a TRC indictee. Louis Brown was a very close associate, renowned, well-known associate of then President Charles Taylor, who happened to be a warlord of the National Patriotic Front of Liberia, who are both who are basically highly responsible, greatly responsible for the war and economic crimes against the Liberian people that took away the lives of over 200,000 Liberians. He's a man with tainted character. And we are in the fight for the victims of crimes, economic crimes, and war crimes against the Liberian people. So for a man with tainted character like Louis Brown, we are calling on the Senate, we are calling on the President, Honorable Joseph Boakai, to ensure that that nomination is rescinded, or that the Senate should reject that nomination. And for those who are arguing that Louis Brown was in power before Louis Brown was nominated and Louis Brown was sent to the General Assembly, we want to let you know that he was sent there by Ellen Johnson, one of those who sent him. Ellen Johnson, of all persons, you all know, former President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, is also an indicted or an indictee of the TRC. Madam Sirleaf is a TRC indicted criminal. So all her fight was to ensure that she undermined the TRC. So the nomination of Louis Brown by Madam Sirleaf was no surprise because, as you all know, they are both indictees of the TRC. So the best thing she could have done to undermine the TRC was to send an indictee. So it's an indictee nominating an indictee. In this case, with Joseph Boakai, President Joseph Boakai promised that there was going to be no business as usual. President Joseph Boakai came to power on a promise that there was going to be no business as usual, quote unquote. And he was going to fight against impunity. He was going to fight against injustice. He was going to fight against corruption. He was going to be fighting for the upholding of the rule of law. And it even undermines his Executive Order 131 that established the War and Economic Crime Court. If you as Liberian are advocating today that Liberia should have the non-permanent seat at the United Nations at the United Nations Security Council, and at the same time sending an indicted TRC indictee to the very United Nations, that August body, for which you are striving to obtain a non-permanent seat at the Security Council, and then you take an indicted TRC indictee and send them to the United Nations, how serious can you be taken? How serious can you be? To at one point in time fight for a non-permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council, and at the same time send a man with tainted character, a man who is indicted by the TRC, to go and represent the Liberian people at the United Nations General Assembly. It's a complete contradiction. It's a complete contradiction. And so for that reason, we are calling on the President, Joseph Boakai, to immediately withdraw the nomination of Louis Brown as an ambassador to the United Nations on behalf of the Liberian people. We are also saying that, Honorable Joseph Boakai, your nomination of Louis Brown undermines your Executive Order 131 that established the War and Economic Crime Code. To both Senate and House of Representatives passed resolution to establish a War and Economic Crime Code. So for them, it is an easy thing. Any attempt for the Senate to confirm Louis Brown would be undermining their resolution they passed to establish War and Economic Crime Code. And so I would like to recommend that President Joseph Boakai look among the Liberian people and find an individual with impeccable character and the experience necessary to go and represent the Liberian people as an ambassador to the United Nations. And for doing that, we'll be considering it as doing the right thing. Honorable Joseph Boakai, do the right thing for the Liberian people for once. Something that you promised, something that you came to power and promised to do. On the basis of that, you'll be sending a message to would-be perpetrators and former perpetrators, alleged perpetrators of war and economic crimes, that this is a new day in Liberia and there will not be business as usual. You need to send a clear message to perpetrators and would-be perpetrators that there will not be no business as usual. The United Nations will take us seriously Any attempt to do otherwise will be undermining your fight for justice. It will be undermining your fight against impunity. It will be undermining your fight for upholding of the rule of law. And I would like to say to you today, if you do that, you will have done the right thing. The world is watching. And so, my fellow Liberian citizens, I want to say thank you. May God bless you. We call on all well-meaning Liberians to support the fight to reject the nomination of Louis Brown. We call on the religious community. We call on the human rights groups in Liberia, civil society organizations, religious community, the Liberia Bar Association, the international community to condemn the nomination of Louis Brown as Liberia's ambassador to the United Nations and ask the president to withdraw that nomination and find a competent Liberian without tainted character to go and represent the Liberian people at the United Nations General Assembly. And so I want to say thank you. May God bless you. May God bless Liberia.